Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the joint work session of the Edina City Council and the Edina Park Board. It's August 30th, 2011, 5:30 in the afternoon. And roll call, please, Ms. Mangan.
Here. Here.
Here. We are also joined by our colleagues from the Park Board, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves for the record as well. Daniel?
I'm Dan Peterson.
Bill Law.
Ellen Jones. Sue Jacobson.
Joseph Hulbert.
Kia Steele.
All right, very good. John, I'll let you lead off. We're going to receive a report on the Edina Golf Course operations. We had retained a consultant, the National Golf Foundation, and I think Richard Singer from the National Golf Foundation is here to make the presentation, and I'll let you handle the introductions.
Gladly. Thank you, Mayor Hovland, members of the council, and good evening, Park Board. Thank you for being here. With us tonight, we have Richard Singer, who's the Director of Consulting Services for the National Golf Foundation. Richard was here in late June and did about three or four days of study with our staff and visited all of our golfing facilities, including the Dome, the Richards Golf Course, of course, all of our holes at Braemar. And I understand he also visited several of our competing golf courses in the Twin City area to get familiarized with the market. He has about a 35 slide presentation for you tonight, and what he'd ask that if you can hold your questions to the end if you can. If not, that's okay. And after that, you'll be happy to field questions from Park Board and Council. So with that, welcome Richard Singer.
Welcome, Mr. Singer.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, great to be back in Edina, which has kind of become my home away from home for a part of the summer of 2011. This has been certainly a very rewarding experience for me to study your golf system, and you certainly have a lot to be proud of here in Edina with your golf facilities. There's a little bit of a welcome to my world type of thing. I know that you only see one golf system, the City of Edina's golf system. That's the system that you know and are familiar with. But my world is traveling around all over the country and visiting communities that have municipal golf systems that are looking to understand them better and to try to make improvements to them. So I've seen a lot of it, and I've certainly brought a lot of that experience to bear in the report that I'm providing for you. Just a quick backgrounder on the National Golf Foundation. We've been in business for a long time, and we're a leader in information services for the golf industry. A big part of our business, which I manage, is municipal golf consulting, as I mentioned. Myself, Richard Singer, 22 years with the NGF, managed this project for you. I had assistance from Mr. Ed Getherall, who I think some of you have spoken to over the months. Was not able to attend this meeting, but was certainly a key part in this process. As we understood it, the purpose that brought the National Golf Foundation to Edina was some issues related to your municipal golf system, particularly financial downturn. You wanted somebody to come in and review the operations, take a look at the facilities there and review the management, the staffing, and to make some recommendations to ensure the short-term and long-term viability of this, and as was mentioned to me many times, to preserve this most important recreational asset for your city. We did a rather extensive study. We did a lot of meetings and interviews with your city staff here at City Hall, certainly meetings and interviews with the golf course management team and key staff at the facility, as well as the Braemar Golf Association people and some other citizen groups. Physical inspection of your facilities, review of financial records. We did a golf market analysis, field research, and certainly did some interviews and visits with some other facilities in some other cities within the Twin Cities area to help get some comparative work. Just some general background, I mean, and findings. You know, you certainly have a good reputation in this community, and I think that the facilities you have reflect well on your city. You've had some declines recently in terms of economic performance. And we noted in our report that you had made some changes over the years, clubhouse expansions, a 9-hole expansion. You acquired the Fred Richards Golf Course some years ago. But what we wanted to do in our review is consider the golf assets to be fixed. We don't want to go into the past and reevaluate decisions that were made years ago. We want to focus on what you have today and going forward. What we provided as part of our review, a review of your system and the operating structure that you have. We reviewed some industry norms that are as part of our report deliverable to you to see how your system compares to other municipal golf operations around the country. Took a look at the market status in the Minneapolis area and the Edina area in particular. We gave you a set of recommendations for action items that you could engage in to help improve things, and tried to paint a realistic picture for you about the economic performance of your golf system going forward. One of the findings certainly that jumped out at us, and we did a pretty thorough evaluation as part of our deliverable report to you, the details contained in the report. It's my opinion as your consultant, that your present system should be continued, that our review really did not show any obvious privatization type option that would put you in a better position economically than you are today. And we reviewed those pretty extensively. I'm certainly prepared to answer any questions about that, but essentially what we were focused on is, would it put you in a better economic position? I know that a lot of times we see, again, welcome to my world, but a lot of times we see municipalities that see sometimes privatization as an easy button. You just push this button and all the economic problems of your golf system will go away. It doesn't always work that way, and there's a lot of moving parts to it. And we tried to give you a thorough evaluation of that as part of this report. But our conclusion was that we didn't see anything that clearly puts you in a better place economically than continuing where you are. Your present system appears efficient to us. It's within the norms observed with other large municipal golf systems, both in this market and around the country. And I've sensed and had documentation of the fact that your system is making the adjustments and changes that need to be made, given the realities of the 2011 golf market and beyond. And we recommend that your system essentially be retained. I think the idea of a strong general manager position, someone who is in charge at the facility and all of the staff reports to that individual, and that position should be business-oriented as opposed to maintenance-oriented, which we see in some cases around the country, where a superintendent is promoted to direct the golf operations. It's a very competitive business now. It's a tough business to be in. The city of Edina is in the golf business, and you're in a very competitive business competing with other cities and other golf courses, and you really need to make sure that you have the appropriate business people in place to do that. A couple of other items that we identified, just some modernization items. Upgrading your point of sale systems we thought was something that would help you. Updating your internet and media systems to allow the facility, the golf courses, to market themselves more appropriately in 2011. It's all about the internet nowadays. 90% of all golfers are getting their information about golf courses via the World Wide Web. And I think that the new website initiatives that we're seeing and the new golf marketing that has been put in place in 2011 is exactly along the lines of what I find myself recommending in many other cities, and I was certainly very pleased to see that being implemented here in Edina, where it may not have been in the past. And I think that you will see benefit from that going forward. Just to give you a little sense of comparison, you've experienced a 9.6% decline in the rounds of golf played at your golf facilities since 2007. The U.S. average is 10% decline. So you're right on par with what's going on in the nation. So I can firmly say to you as a consultant, you're not alone. What you're experiencing with your golf operation is very consistent with what we're seeing all around the country. I think that it probably is going to get worse for you in 2011. You had a very wet spring. This is a weather-dependent market, and I'm projecting that your rounds are probably going to fall to under 92,000 rounds total for 2011. I think you did 103,000 in 2010, and that represented that 9.6% decline. So you've got more decline yet to come. But despite the 9% or almost 10% decline in rounds, you've only declined about 4% in revenue, which is a good indicator for you. However, that's going to continue, though, in 2011. But in overall, despite all the declines, this is still a $3.4 million operation. Even if it falls as we project in 2011, it's still a $3.1 or $3.2 million operation. That's certainly very considerable, and places you in the top 5% of all municipal golf courses around the country, or municipal golf operations around the country. It's a very high level of revenue. Along with high revenue comes high expense. You're spending about $2.7 million in total operating expenses in your facilities. The thing that impressed me, though, is that you've remained fairly constant with this. We see a lot of inflation in golf course expenses, and I haven't really observed that in the records that we reviewed here in Edina. It shows the staff is aware of what's going on and certainly trying to make an effort to reduce that, to keep you within the norms that we expect for the industry. You're a little bit of a hybrid in Braemar in that you have a lot of facets of your golf course that fall within what we call a standard category. The NGF divides all public golf into essentially three categories. There's the value, standard, and premium based on price. There's some aspects of your operation that put you in the standard category, which is the middle priced category. But I also see some facets that put you in the premium category. The clubhouse facilities that you have, the quality of golf course and its maintenance condition. So when you look at it in terms of the averages around the country that we've included in this report, you kind of fit right in between that. Your expenses are higher than standard but lower than premium, so it's kind of where you would expect to be. We did a thorough review of the fee structure and looked at it very closely and in comparison with what's going on in the market, and we documented some of that in this report for you. And overall, the recommendation is no major change in fees. I did observe a couple of places where I think you could make some adjustment, and we identified that in this report. But one thing that you have to think about is trying to figure out a way to maintain annual or semi-annual increases to keep up with inflation. What I see a lot of in municipal golf that we work with is communities that have a tough time pushing their green fees up, while at the same time there's inflation in their expenses. And you've got to make sure that these fees keep up with inflation. We're recommending a 2% increase every other year, which is essentially a 1% increase every year, which hopefully would be reasonable for your community. Golf courses are living, breathing assets. You know, one of the things that scare me when I see communities that start to see a little struggle, perhaps with their golf operations, they reduce investment in capital, and that can catch up to you. And I would strongly recommend, as your consultant, to be careful about that. Deferred maintenance can catch up to you over time, and it's a lot cheaper to maintain these things as you go than it is to try to do a repair or replacement later on because something has failed. We've recommended specific upgrades in this report, and I'll get into that in just a couple of minutes, that are designed to help you improve revenue that would fundamentally change some of the things that are present at your facilities. But in general, the day-to-day upkeep, make sure that you really keep that at an appropriate level. I mentioned before that you're in the golf business, and it's a tough business to be in. There are things in this business you can control, and there are things that you can't control. And what we tried to do as part of this report is help identify for you some of the items that you cannot control so that you can understand them, but focus on the things that you can control. You know, you can't control a national recession. You can't control a decline in demand for golf nationwide and locally. You can't control the fact that there have been 14.5 new golf courses added in this market in the last 10 years. But you certainly can do a lot of things with your facilities to try to bring new people to the game, to try to attract new players, less skilled beginners, females, minorities. There's all sorts of categories of people that we've identified as potential growth opportunities for you. You've got great facilities in Braemar and Fred Richards to do that, and the Golf Dome, of course, as well. You also have an older age demographic in Edina, which could become a longer-term concern for you. It's kind of a double-edged sword. Golf participation tends to be a little higher among older age segments, which is positive for you now, but in 10, 15, 20 years, that's going to change, and the older golfers are going to need to be replaced with younger players. And that's certainly going to be a critical element for you in the long-term success of your facilities. We looked at other Minneapolis area municipal golf operations and documented some of that for you in this report. And I wanted to make sure that you understood that you compare favorably, that it's not obvious that other municipalities or other cities are getting by with less, or that they have fewer employees, or that they are doing it more efficiently than you. There's nothing that I see in Edina Golf that's out of the ordinary with the other municipalities in this area. We did all sorts of ratio analysis in here, the number of staff per 18 holes, the number of labor percent as a total percent of expenses. And we looked at Minneapolis, we looked at a couple of other cities, and we found that you fit right in. It's within reason of everything that we see. You compare favorably in terms of quality and condition and price on a competitive standpoint. But you're in a market that's highly weather dependent, obviously. Shorter season than maybe we have in Florida, and you know, that certainly affects your business. There's fewer number of days that you could play golf.
Did you divide both our sites out when you looked at the expenses, Fred Richards and our main site?
We did, and that's contained in the report. However, when we did the comparison with the other cities, I did not. I looked at you as a system as a whole, and I looked at these other cities that have multiple facilities as a system as a whole. A couple of little summary pieces of each component within your system. The Braemar 27 certainly is widely regarded, and it's not just the people in Edina that said this to me, but other interviews that I did of people outside Edina also recognized Braemar as a premier public golf course in this area. And, I mean, your facilities are in good condition. There's nothing urgent. There's no urgent replacement that we noted in our review of this. Your rounds and revenue totals are well above the norm, as we had indicated earlier. Coupled with that is expenses that are probably above the norm. So I think it's both cases. It's kind of, you're caught in that hybrid land between standard and premium. You've got some premium elements that require you to maintain these facilities at a high level, which is expensive, but you're being rewarded with a high level of revenue as well. I certainly was impressed with the maintenance condition of the Braemar facility. A couple spots here and there, as is always the case in golf. You can't get away with that. It seems to me that maintaining your golf courses up in this climate is probably a little bit more difficult than in other places. You come out of the winter every year, and the snow melts, and you just don't know what you're going to have underneath it all, right? I mean, so you have to certainly, it could be different from year to year. Some years are easier than others. But it's a living, breathing asset. It's fragile, and turf, you really need to be careful about how it's maintained and not let consumer pressures dictate to you how you should maintain your golf courses. You have to trust your people who are in charge of that to know what's best for it and the conditions that it needs to be in. One of the things that you are doing, though, that we recommend a change in is that you're limiting the use of carts. Power carts on the golf course during particularly wet periods. When I was here in late June, it was a rainy period, and I think it rained nonstop one day, and I came out to Braemar for an inspection the next day, and carts were not allowed out on the golf course, but the sun was shining, and it was a fine day to play golf. And one of the things that you can do at golf courses is put in wall-to-wall cart paths. You only have cart paths now in the tee areas and the green areas. And if you put cart paths throughout the golf course, that would enable carts to go out onto the course even when it's wet, because the wheels would not be on the turf, damaging your turf. It's a relatively small investment that you could make to help improve the number of rounds you could play in wet periods. That's money being left on the table on wet days that people want to play golf, and they don't want to walk, they want to ride, and if they can't ride, they're not going to play. I think a cart path expansion program would definitely be one of the recommended upgrades that we have documented in this report. A lot of people expressed concern to me about the newer Clooney 9, and I mentioned earlier that we didn't want to go back in time and refight decisions that were made years ago. But I can tell you as your consultant that it's probably not going to be economically justified for you to do a major renovation to to solve this. I know that there are some people out there in favor of it, and I saw some documentation to that effect in the materials that were provided to me. I think when you look at what it would cost you to renovate the Clooney 9 and what you would gain in terms of additional revenue aren't going to match up with each other. You may be better served to make some minor adjustments and work with your team that's in place there to do what you can to make it a little more appealing to some of the golfer segments who find it less appealing. You've got a great driving range facility at Braemar. However, the configuration is tight. You've got limited space there, and that's certainly affecting a lot of things. It's affecting your lesson program. It's affecting the limited space of tee area, which causes the turf to be excessively worn, and the conditions would look worse. I would recommend a northward expansion of the Braemar range that we have documented in the report. It may cost you a couple of $100,000 to do it. We've estimated $300,000 or $400,000. However, I do believe that this will lead to immediate increased revenue, both in your lesson program and in your driving range. And another added benefit is, in order to change the configuration of your driving range, you're going to have to change the configuration of the Braemar Executive Course, which presently is very similar to Fred Richards. And what you could do is convert the Braemar Executive Course into a Braemar Par 3 course, which would have 9 Par 3 holes, typically referred to in the industry maybe as a pitch and putt. Has a lot of appeal to beginners and younger people, and I think that would really give you another added step in that range of facilities, from a driving range to a pitch and putt to an executive course to a 9-hole course to a regulation course. That's truly a something for everyone system. I think that might have the opportunity to move some of the executive golf players who are playing there now over to Fred Richards and bring in a whole new level of customer to a pitch and putt course at Braemar. Your clubhouse is a good facility. It has some age. I know it's been expanded and changed over time, but it certainly seems like an adequate size, and it's serving the needs. It's a great component to your system and a great complement to Braemar. Given some of the realities of golf and golf demand leveling off, you may find that the clubhouse is your best opportunity for revenue growth in this facility, both in terms of banquets and the grill operation, and perhaps even some additional food and beverage service. You probably could do more there to attract a greater volume of non-golf business to the Braemar Grill. That may require some change or some expansion of the menu or some change of some other things, but it's certainly something to consider there. But in our review, it does appear that when we broke all of these independent components out and analyzed them separately, that the one area that jumped out in the red as being a losing economically for you was the Braemar Grill. Now, I'd be careful in jumping to conclusions about that, because there's a lot of issues related to your overhead allocation with regard to that. I know that all of the clubhouse expense is put into the grill operation, even though some of the clubhouse expense relates to the pro shop and other things and so forth. But it's certainly something to look at. And one of the things we did evaluate for you is some type of a concession agreement to consider. Standard in the industry would be to get 10% from a potential concessionaire to operate your food and beverage operation at the golf course. You should keep the revenue from banquet hall rentals and maintain the facilities, but any concessionaire should be responsible for all variable costs. If you did that, as we'll show in a minute, it might improve your overall food and beverage operation, but I still think you'd find that you'd lose money on it. I think there's room to increase your room rental fees, and the only major capital improvement recommended for your clubhouse is a renovation of those banquet area restrooms, which were an add-on and probably not appropriate for a large-scale banquet operation. Fred Richards, I won't go through all of this in detail, except to say to you that it's kind of one of those where it is what it is type of facilities. And my recommendation there is to try to get the most out of it that you can, maintain it, don't let it deteriorate, make sure that you keep up with it. But I think you'll find that a large-scale capital renovation there is not going to pay for itself. It's a good facility. Get the most out of it that you can, and make sure that it doesn't deteriorate. The golf dome is certainly an interesting piece to your system, and I was impressed with it. What I like about the golf dome is it keeps people interested in golf in the winter. when they're otherwise, you know, the clubs are in the closet and you've got to wait till spring, there's a place to go where you can hit golf balls and stay interested and stay focused. The facility may be showing some age. I don't know what the expected useful life of something like that is. I figure probably 25 or 30 years, and it's been there 28 years. So it's something that should be on your radar screen to keep in mind. I don't think it's urgent that you do a replacement there. Again, one of the things that we use to evaluate you is return on investment ideas and cost justification. It's difficult to justify spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on the golf dome, but it's functional, and you certainly need to keep up the maintenance, and there may be some things you can do to patch the existing facilities, you know, secure the building, make sure it's not going to fall down on you, and, you know, maybe be a little more flexible with the hours of operation and when it's open. Keep it open later in the fall, maybe open it earlier in the spring. Excuse me, I might have gotten that backward.
Reverse, yeah.
Yeah.
You reported to, you had it reversed.
Exact opposite of what I had said. Just try to get a little more out of it. It seems like it's almost counter-cyclical to your golf operations. You know, in 2011, the golf operation was down because of the wet weather, but the golf dome actually improved a lot in revenue. It's a good piece for you then to keep in there. Some other ideas, you may want to emphasize merchandise sales in there a little bit more when the dome is open. Coming to the end here, we had tried to do a projection for you of your future operation to help you understand the new reality, if you will, of your golf operation, and to recognize some things that are coming in the future. Most importantly, you've got debt service that's coming to an end in 2013. I think that'll free up some money for you in terms of the system, and you can start beginning to reduce the accumulated deficit on this that I know is at or near $1 million. We've made these projections that are contained in the report that show that, you know, beginning in 2014, you should be able to start reducing that in light of some of these other investments as well. But again, you've got to commit to some type of inflation in your fees. We recommended 2% every other year. I looked at that grill concession idea for you and documented that in this report and showed what it would look like if everything else at Braemar stayed the same, but you concessioned out the grill concession, well, on the 10% deal that we talked about earlier. And this arrangement would improve the financial situation with the Braemar Grill, but it still shows it in the red. But you'll have to look at how you allocate overhead there before you make a decision like that, would be my recommendation, to really make sure that you're tying specific clubhouse expenses that relate to the Braemar Grill directly to the Braemar Grill to really get a good sense of what that business as a standalone business is doing. But I think there's opportunity there to improve the performance of that. Finishing up, we made a lot of recommendations. I tried to summarize some here. There's quite a bit of them in this report. Hopefully your city will take it to heart. We tried to focus on what increases revenue and what reduces expenses. There may be some items that require capital investment, kind of along the lines of a you have to spend money to make money type of idea. I think that you have to keep up with this type of facility and make sure that it stays appropriate for the community and the constituency that it serves. But you also probably need to prepare for a new reality. You're probably not going to get back to where you were 10 years ago. I think that 2011 is probably an exception, given the perfect storm of everything that kind of came together on top of you in terms of the economy and price of gas and weather and new facilities and all of that, all happening at the same time. I think that you should be able to do better than in 2011. I think that could be a low point for you, those 92,000 rounds. But you probably shouldn't expect us to get back to where it was in 2001. I think that there's definitely a new reality that we tried to identify in our projections here for you. But my final point, I would say, we like to recommend action steps in these jobs as consultants. And I think that for the National Golf Foundation, we identified 5 key issues that are leading to your hardship that we wanted to share with you. These are if I had to summarize it all and was only presenting a couple of slides to you tonight, this would certainly be one of them. This is what you've been experiencing here. And I think these are the 5 most important reasons why your golf system is stressed. Weather impacts, the recent increase in the number of golf courses. You had a high overall expense structure in place at this facility, which you've been working to reduce. I applaud staff for that. There's a trend toward declining golf activity nationwide. Time constraints, as we documented in this report, are key. Family constraints, work constraints. It's a tough activity to find the time to participate in. And you've kind of declined a little bit in the amount of investment that you've made in these facilities over the last few years as the revenues have declined. But despite that, I still think you have high-quality facilities and you've got a good reputation. It certainly appears to me that you have a dedicated staff that is very committed to these properties and doing all they can to improve it. And you've got strong basic market characteristics. The Edina population is highly conducive to high golf activity, from what I see. Minnesota has one of the highest golf participation rates of all the states in the union, and Edina is high even for Minnesota standards. So you certainly have a lot of positive things to look at in your system. So in summary, I would identify the 5 most important actions that we would recommend for you to do to pay off the existing debt, invest in the upgrades recommended by NGF, modernize your marketing, continue with the expense controls that have been instituted in the last year or so, and that lesson program, I was told, is the largest in Minnesota. It's certainly the largest I've ever seen, so I believe it's the case. And I think that's a real opportunity for you for the future, both in terms of the direct revenue that the lesson program will produce, as well as creating a whole stream of future golfers for you going forward. So I apologize if I went long, but that essentially is a summary of the review that we did, and you certainly have a lot to be proud of, as I indicated here in Edina, and I was very impressed with your facilities, and I'm available to answer your questions.
All right, Mr. Singer, you did not take too much time. It was a thorough review of your report. I think the executive summary that you sent to us earlier was very helpful. We're going to have some questions for you, I think, starting with Member Swenson, and members of the Park Board may have questions as well.
Thank you. It was a great report. When you were talking to people, do we treat minorities, women? Was there any complaint about how we treat them? That was an area you said that we could increase. Is there any? Are we open to anyone playing, and do we seem to be encouraging and accepting of everyone?
I would say yes to that. I think that my point was it's an area maybe to reach out to as opposed to not exclude. I don't see any evidence in any way, shape, or form that there's any exclusion or anything like that going on. But there could be more outreach into some of these other communities to try to bring people and let them know that this is an open facility and it's available to anyone and it has something for everyone.
We have some restrictions on ages when kids can start playing the course. Are they similar to other public courses? They're different than the private courses, so are they similar to public courses?
Yes, I think they're appropriate. They were lowered in just the last year, if I'm not mistaken. And I think if you add the pitch and putt course, as we recommended, you might consider lowering that again just a little bit. But, much lower than 8 years old, I think you're probably, maybe pushing it. But for a pitch and putt course, you could let younger people out. And they're certainly welcome on the driving range as well. So I think that that's probably appropriate. Because
we're a course that isn't a total premium course and we aren't a total standard course and we pay more money to keep the course up, does that put us in an awkward position for pricing, or do you think that we can hold our price because of what we offer?
I think you can hold your price because of what you offer. You're already at the higher end of the market, and the market certainly seems to have accepted that.
Because we get complaints sometimes, we're too expensive, we go play other places. So my question was, should we just try to be a standard course, or should we continue to be the in-between?
I would recommend remaining the in-between, because sometimes communities get into trouble with that. And there's 2 things I could say to that. Number one, sometimes when you lower your price, it's the concept in business of trading rate for volume. You lower your price in order to increase the volume, but you increase the volume, you get more rounds and more carts and more divots, and the maintenance condition can start to decline, and then you can get into problems with that. But in other places, given the realities of golf, we find that people reduce their rate in order to try to increase volume, and the volume doesn't materialize, and now you're stuck with the same, discounting your golf to the same people that were willing to pay the higher price before. So I would think that based on everything that I've seen, that you're probably priced appropriately, other than a few specific recommendations that we made.
And my final question, I think I got the answer because I paged through this while you were talking, excuse me, but that Fred Richards at least breaks even. if not makes a little money, so that as a separate course unto itself, not having it wouldn't save us money.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Although it does appear that way, however, one key component to that is that you're sharing a superintendent with Braemar. But I do believe there's an allocation for that within the expenses.
Okay.
But,
I mean, we're obviously paying off the loan from buying it, and that's one of the costs that we're...
I think it's a great complement to your system. If you make the adjustments we've recommended to your range and you add the pitch and putt course, I think Fred Richards will end up doing better as an individual facility.
Thank you. That's it.
Got a few questions on your wall-to-wall cart path recommendation. Do you have a material that you recommend? I noticed over at Edina Country Club across the road now when they did their remodeling work, they transitioned to all, I'll call it Class 5 cart paths as opposed to asphalt or concrete.
Yeah.
What's your recommendation?
We recommended asphalt, mainly for cost purposes. The concrete cart path system is, that's a $500,000 investment for Braemar 27. Plus the fact that you already have, it's not like you have no cart paths there at all. The tees and greens already have an asphalt cart path, so really just a continuation of that system. And there may be some other things you could do to save money that I've seen in other places, gravel type cart paths or even a dirt-based type cart path. Just the key is you got to get the carts out when it's wet. That's the most important thing. And whatever surface that requires to do that, you can make that work.
I just want to make a couple of comments. I found your report quite reassuring and affirming of some things that we just sort of instinctively felt here, that we have good management in place, folks that understand now what we need to do in terms of use of electronics for marketing. I think a lot of us recognize that the driving range needs to be redone, and that should be a top priority. That it's a great source of revenue for us, but it ought to meet modern standards. We ought to be able to accommodate what equipment can do now. We ought to be able to improve our turf conditions so that we can manage the turf better. So I think your notion of having Fred Richards be the executive course, turning the executive course at Braemar into a par 3 course, and then having our full 27 plus a state-of-the-art practice facility it kind of covers all the bases in the golf industry. I think it's a good suggestion, and also one that's been made by several of our key senior staff people over the years. So, other questions? Oh, I had in association with that, in conjunction with that, we also all know that we've got some debt issues to take care of from a bonding standpoint, and that 2013 is kind of the year where we make that transition, where we have historically thought that's when we can start making some investments. But what I see, at least in the executive summary, is that you're recommending that we think about a couple of these things earlier than 2013, and that would be the wall-to-wall cart paths and the renovation of the driving range and the conversion of the exec course to a par 3. Is that a correct reading?
That's correct. Certainly the cart paths could be done, immediately. The range reconfiguration may take some planning, so you may not want to rush into that. So you do it right. But certainly, I would hope that you could do that before 2013, or have it open for golf season in 2013 at the latest.
All right. And one final question for me, at least at this point in time. Braemar, as a public golf course, will be 50 years old in 2014. So we think about a 50-year-old facility with basically a very good layout. And I'm wondering whether you think we should be considering, tweaking it and updating it at its 50-year anniversary, or is that something that you see further downstream that we might want to take a look at?
It's certainly always an option. I think you have to, some of that is going to be, within the tolerance within your community. I think that if you ask me purely as an economist about some of those questions and whether these are cost-justified, return on investment type questions, you may find that it's a little tougher. But when you have a lot of pride in your community and pride in the assets in your community, there's a non-economic benefit to doing that. And to really stand behind it and say, look at us, look at Edina, look what we have, look what we've done, and recognizing that we're not going to be back here a couple years after that saying, well, this thing's losing money and it's got this debt service now. And I mean, we've seen that. So It's a community asset, and it has a public service component to it, but it's also a business, and you have to try to balance those two. But I would say, always keep after it. It's better to do these on an ongoing basis, these upgrades, little by little over time, rather than all at once. I think that tends to work better for public golf.
Member Bennett?
Following up on the cart path questions, have other courses with similar recommendations encountered any watershed issues? Is there any kind of mitigation or replacement required when you're laying down a hard surface? I know it's in the 9 Mile Creek watershed.
Yes,
district.
it is, and I don't think it's going to change your profile enough to do that, but I certainly would certainly have that as part of your review upon completing this project to make sure. But there are already hard surfaces there on a considerable portion of the golf course already. So it would be my suspicion that you're not going to change the profile enough to make that change. But I can't speak for certain about that.
So was there any evaluation of adequacy of parking? Do we know if there would be any place to make some trade-offs if it were required that there be some mitigation for the creation of more cart path?
Yeah, we did not do a full parking study for you. I mean, that parking lot seemed adequate based on the counts that we did and the reviews that we had and the interviews that we had. It was not an issue that was raised to us as being an issue. I could imagine if you have a large, some type of luncheon or banquet in the daytime, that would occur maybe on a weekend when people are playing golf at the same time, and you've got a full, busy 27-hole golf course and a full, busy driving range and a large banquet going on at the same time. I imagine you might have some parking issues. But I can't answer the issue. I can't answer the question regarding what the environmental impact might be of that.
Sure, and your comments segue into my next set of questions, which concerns the clubhouse. Is there any scenario under which the clubhouse becomes not necessarily profitable, but moves into the black? If a concession arrangement does not move it into the black, is there a scenario that would, with it still operating?
Yeah, I think there is. I think it just has to increase its volume, increase its activity in terms of the number of people that it serves. It has to reach out to non-golfers. At present, I would think the predominance of use of the Braemar Grill is from the golfers. And then you have some use when, I know when I was there was a lunch meeting, or rather, excuse me, a business meeting of some type going on in the Braemar room, and people were coming out to the Braemar Grill and purchasing a lunch, that type of thing. But in terms of just a day-to-day location to come and have a sandwich and a drink or something like that, we see that in other places where when you have outstanding clubhouse facilities that are capable of hosting that's the way you have to do it. I would think that's the only way. Either that, that would be one way, but in addition to that, also expanding the number of banquets and parties that you're hosting there. It seems like it's a real good value. A lot of times when you have recession and economic downturn, people look for a less expensive option for their weddings, their banquets, their reunions, their parties that you may be able to provide at Braemar. So I think if you can expand the non-golf meal business and expand your banquet and event business, I believe that will help you put that in the black, yes.
What about the, I think it's presently open in the winter, open year-round. Was there any evaluation of whether that is a cost-effective operation? Would that be part of your recommendation, that it remain open year-round?
It was, and I think the key there is to have banquets and parties and use the clubhouse facilities for that. As far as the Braemar Grill being open year-round, I think to some extent you could do that during the day, but it was not recommended to the extent that you have it open during the golf season. And we made some other recommendations regarding your winter operations, and your staff has done a lot to improve that in terms of full-time, part-time type of positions. You do have golf course responsibilities over the course of the winter in terms of business planning and preparing your golf course physically for the upcoming season. But I would think that if you're not going to be aggressive in going after grill business and you're not utilizing the facility for events and banquets, then I think you will have to rethink whether or not it's open year-round.
Okay. What about the pricing structure for banquets and parties?
I recommended some increase for the banquet room. You're not catering at present. You have a list of approved caterers that people can use when they cater parties at Braemar, and you really don't have any control over that pricing. But the ones that you do, I mean, that certainly seems appropriate, that are done through the Braemar Grill. But it looked like there was some room to maybe increase your pricing in terms of the use of the facilities.
And do you have any recommendations about image for the clubhouse facilities? Understanding that your single recommendation at this point for the clubhouse is the renovation of the bathrooms connected with the banquet operation. What do you think the image of the clubhouse should be, and how would we move toward that or maintain it?
It's a tough question. I think that ultimately the city will have to make that determination. I think it reflects well on your city and reflects well on the facilities that you have there at Braemar. It's got a lot of elements that make it traditional and reflective of the date and time in which it was put together. But there's nothing wrong with that. It's functional, and it has some weaknesses, as we have noted. But again, I guess the economist in me always comes out on stuff like that because it's hard to justify the cost. But I think it ties back to the point I made earlier about you and how you feel about your community and pride in your community and the kind of economic pressures you're going to put on a facility like this after an upgrade like that is made, or recognize that, hey, this is a centerpiece for Edina. We want to make it a showpiece, and we want to upgrade this and modernize it and make it really fantastic and beautiful, although you certainly have no complaints from me about its appearance and curb appeal, if you will. I thought was outstanding. It was the first thing that hit me when I pulled in there. There were a couple of gardeners that were working on the landscaping at the time I pulled in, and I said, this is really nice. I have a couple of pictures of it, and it's very nice.
Last question, and it relates again to the clubhouse, and that is that it occurs to me that there's sort of the very upscale, and you've created or described those three categories, the premier, the standard, and the value, and sort of told us where different aspects lie. You put the clubhouse in the premium, but when I think of really fine golf course environments, the country club environment, I don't think we're in that category, nor do I think we necessarily want to be in that category. And then I think of some public facilities operated, like, for instance, by Three Rivers Park District, where they also hold receptions. Do you have any thoughts on, as we move past renovations of bathrooms to other things, again, where with a public course, noting the possible changes and improvements that you note, where would you recommend that we try to position ourselves?
I think you're positioned well. My take on that was based more on the functionality and the services provided as opposed to necessarily the appearance. Very few value facilities and very few standard facilities have the kind of space that you have available in that clubhouse. For large parties of up to 200 people, that's not common in the lower level type of public facilities. So in that regard was kind of where I focused more. In terms of its overall appearance, and I would say, expanding the kitchen might be something to consider as an issue, to be able to provide the catering yourself and to not have to rely on outside caterers could be something that definitely could help you when you handle large banquets and parties. But the deck that was added there and the indoor-outdoor aspect of it, I think that it's, given where you're at and what you've done and the expansions that have taken place over the years, I would say that it's highly functional and certainly has great potential as is, but it needs to be maintained. But in terms of a large-scale upgrade to it, it's hard for me to gauge from an economic standpoint how many more parties or how many more sandwiches you could sell if it was nicer looking. But I think that that's a reasonable way to look at it, and certainly may require a little more evaluation in terms of what exactly would it cost to do that. What are you proposing to do? Are you talking about knocking the entire thing down and rebuilding it as something entirely new? It's an extended process.
Thank you.
Member Brindle.
Thank you. Thanks for your report. In some ways, when I read it, I thought, yeah, I can see those things. I think our staff can see those things. And I think the value here is hearing it from you, that what we see is truly what it is and that we're doing a good job. And what we have is a resource that is important to us, and it brings value to our community. It brings residents to our community. I live in that area of Edina, and I know people who live there because the golf course is there. So there is that. As far as the cart paths are concerned, I do understand and appreciate the need for them. Frankly, it will help me not get lost when I'm going from one hole to another.
Well, that's important.
I am directionally challenged, and I play golf once a year at the Rotary Tournament, so I'm always happy when somebody else is driving. And I mean, that's ridiculous. I'm embarrassed to say it, but that's true. And so the cart paths will help in a number of ways. The paved cart paths, I think, are important for that area because it floods. The area has been, it was a farm for years and years before it became a city property, and it is designed to take on the water from the area.
Right.
So in order for cart paths to survive in that situation, and there are some gravel cart paths that are there, and I'm sure they have to be maintained more so than you'd have to do if they were paved. So that's my thought there. Looking at the greens fees at Braemar, and just really thinking through some dollars and cents, this is not a lot of money to pay to play 18 holes of golf with a cart. If you have a patron card, you pay $44. If I'm reading this right, you pay $44 for your 18 holes with a cart. If you don't have a patron card, you pay $52 to play your 18 holes with a cart. And what I have not done, and would expect that probably our staff has done or knows about, is what is the comparison with the 6 municipal courses in Minneapolis that are 18 holes and the 3 18-hole courses in St. Paul, just those 2 cities. What's the comparison of our greens fees to those, and how much room do we have? When we met with the enterprises, the directors, managers of the enterprises recently, when we looked at this about cost recovery, and one of the revelations I had when we were talking about Braemar Golf Course is if we increased the greens fees by $1, we could meet our cost recovery. And it was like, well, then do it. When playing golf, $1 is, I mean, you're out there and you're ready to pay your greens fee. $1 isn't, you know, I'm sure I'll get a call, but $1 just isn't that much more important when you are going to play your 18 holes of golf. So that's just simply my opinion. But this just looks like it's a great value for golf. And if we want to look at ourselves as a premier golf course, and in that top tier of golf courses, of municipal courses, maybe we have room to charge a little more for it.
That's an excellent point, and certainly something that you could definitely think about doing. There were a couple of places where I did recommend that you raise some fees, but you are already at the top of the market as it is now. You're about $5 more than the Minneapolis courses to play at present. But you're, as I mentioned before, I mean, you're in a business, and it's a competitive business, and it's not always easier. I mean, I'm sure General Motors would say if we just charged, you know, $100 more per car, they could solve all their problems too. But you know, you have to compete with other people, and it's certainly an issue, and we tried to address it in here. I don't think, given the realities of the Edina golf system, that you need to be too overly aggressive with that, but I think you need to keep up with it as the time goes along. A lot of municipalities that we work with, we go in there and they haven't raised fees since 2006, they haven't raised fees since 2005, and you can't function like that. So you have to make sure that you're keeping up with this and that you're recognizing that the cost to produce golf is going up, the cost to play golf should go up with it. And that would be the primary recommendation that we have regarding that, to make sure that you keep it up. But we did have a couple of changes recommended here. Increase the price of the patron card itself, as well as some other fees. But I think that for the most part, it's appropriately priced.
Okay. One last area, and that is increasing our appeal and broadening our base, particularly to young people. Minneapolis golf courses belong to an association called the First Tee. Dream big, never give up on your dreams. It is an association to attract youth to golf. And if you go to the Minneapolis Golf Course webpage, right there, we're a member of First Tee Association. I don't see that, and this is new to me, so I'm guessing that we are not. So what do you know about this association?
I do. I know a lot about the First Tee. They're a very important component in golf, and a project specifically designed by the powers that be within the industry to try to promote the industry and reach out to youth that otherwise are not exposed to golf. In many cases, it's at places where facilities are not presently active in doing that. And I think that you at Braemar, in particular, at the Braemar Range and Executive Course, are already highly active in junior camps and junior golf programs that reach out to bring young people into the game. It's certainly something you could look at, but I think in terms of a pure benefit of increasing volume or increasing the number of people, the number of young people actively involved in your golf facilities, I think you'll find that you're already very strong in that area. And some of the other communities that are adding that were places that were not strong previously in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
Member Sprague.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for this excellent report and all the detailed work you did, and to the Park Board for all their work on bringing this together with staff. There's a comment on page 6 at the top. It says the city should be careful not to let customer pressure influence maintenance practices, i.e. green speeds, and create the potential to damage fragile turf conditions. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, just in general, we see when we go around to municipal golf operations, public golf operations, that there's pressure on golf operators to have conditions be a certain way for a certain level of appeal that may not be reflective of what is actually needed in terms of the maintenance condition of the golf course. And it was just sort of a warning to you and to the staff there to be careful about allowing that to dictate how you maintain your golf courses. I've seen a lot of problems over the years with that when superintendents succumb to pressure from consumers who are watching a golf tournament on TV and they see the picture from the blimp and they get a certain view and they say, well, why can't my golf course look like that? And they put pressure on them to try to make it look like that. And it's like, well, it's a living, breathing asset. It's turf, and you can't always produce that. So that was essentially all that was.
And what's your opinion as to the quality of the green speeds that we have now? Would you change that at all, or do you think they're good as is?
Well, I think they're good as is, given the recommendation of your superintendent on a day-to-day or month-to-month or period basis. You may find that you'll have kind of like a day-to-day type of green speed that the superintendent is comfortable with, but maybe when a certain tournament is getting ready to come up that's important, a big Edina golf tournament type of thing, and they want to change it for that, we oftentimes see that that's okay for superintendents to make that kind of a change, knowing that it'll go back to what's most appropriate. But you want to make sure that you protect these greens and that they're there for the long haul and not stress them in order to please a small group of people who want them a little bit faster. So some people want them faster, some people want them slower. It's same as maybe driving on the highway. You know, some people are going faster than you, some people are going slower than you, but you try to make it go along. So it's something to keep in mind. I don't think it was a major issue in Edina. It was certainly something that we like to put in our reports in all cases, because it's something that we definitely see in municipal golf more so than in other private clubs and private businesses.
And I want to go back to the clubhouse analysis and just kind of decouple the catering facilities from the grill. because you were talking about the appearance, and I've been to some newer course clubhouses like Town Hall and Chaska, and I don't understand how it's a functional facility, but it's dated, and I'm a little confused as to how we can attract newer people to the scene through simple menu offerings without doing some capital improvements to the facility itself. I mean, you can change the menu at Perkins, but it's still Perkins. It's not, you know, Salou restaurant at 50th of France. So can you talk a little bit more about what potentially could be done on the inside that would work along with menu changes to attract non-golfers and also, I think, younger people?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that it's appropriate. You know, certainly the furniture and fixtures and carpeting and tables and chairs and all of those things certainly need to be replaced on a regular basis so that they don't get too tired or damaged in any way. But again, I think your point is appropriate and well taken, and I think you're right, and it's definitely something you have to decide. But you know, again, I don't want to beat the dead horse, but the economist in me comes out. I've just seen too many horror stories out there with municipalities that have made big investment in golf clubhouses. They're far more likely to run into trouble meeting debt service on a clubhouse redo than they are on golf course redo. And we've had a couple of clients in just the last few years that spent $5, $6, $8 million on a new clubhouse, and now they're, how do we pay for all of this? You know, we need to do 5, 6 weddings a week, every week, you know, 52 weeks a year just to pay the debt service on this. So I get a little nervous about that when I'm looking at these. But
there might be an interim step that's not $8 million, but that might be a minor renovation, because I feel being in that facility and going to other regional facilities that the facility itself is behind the times and needs some freshening.
I think that's a point well taken. I thought, you know, you're right. I mean, for the golf operation, it certainly seems appropriate and functional. If you wanted to reach out and try to compete in the restaurant business, you might have to do some upgrade to that. But I know that there has been some upgrade done. What works at golf courses is kind of the sports pub type of atmosphere. And I know the flat screen TVs have been added in there, and that's always a big positive. But maybe a bar type structure, atmosphere, if you will, where you could sit up at a bar and be served that way, as opposed to only table service sometimes works, we see in golf facilities. And then the issue of whether or not you're going to actually provide tableside service, but that increases your labor cost. It's certainly a difficult decision. I recognize that, and there's no easy answer or magic bullet to that. But I think you could get by with basically the facilities that you have now, with some upgrade as indicated and some change to your offerings.
In terms of Fred Richards, your analysis here is kind of talks about it as a feeder course, and it doesn't deliver a lot of revenue. It covers itself, but its greatest asset is being a feeder course. Did you consider but the other thing you say is that it's in direct competition with Braemar. Have you considered how the system would operate with Fred Richards closed or reallocated into a different use?
We did not look at that. We did not look at that as a possibility, but I do believe it is a great feeder facility. And what we did look at is, if you, in the redo of the driving range and the redo of the Braemar Executive Course, I think that gives new impetus to Fred Richards in terms of its performance. But right now, I think your observation is exactly correct. It is essentially almost identical property to the Braemar Executive Course, both in terms of its par, its length, the type of holes that you have, the water hazards, the whole thing. It's very, very similar. And if you change the Braemar Executive to more of a pitch and putt, I think that there's a lot of demand when you add the two together for executive golf service, a 9-hole executive golf course that could be shifted over to Fred Richards. But in direct answer to your question, no, we did not review this with Fred Richards closed.
So with the change in strategy, with the extension of the driving range and the reduction in size of the Braemar Executive, then it would be more complementary to the system in general.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's our belief.
And then going to the Golf Dome, capital improvements, I'm a little unclear, and I may need Director Caprios to chime in here, but we have a line item in our CIP for 400 or 450,000 for some type of structural replacement, and I'm unclear as to whether that is the lobby replacement that you recommend we don't do, or if that's some other type of replacement. Can I just get clarification on that?
Yeah, I'll let
Okay.
Todd Anderson.
We did put that in the budget as far as a full building replacement and creating structural integrity by putting a beam in. We've now downgraded it to about $140,000, which would be putting that beam in and then just patching what we have.
And that's kind of what he's talking about now?
Right,
Okay,
right.
great. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be our recommendation.
Great. And so that leaves, so the original line item in the CIP was it 400 or 450? It's 440 or 450. 400 or 440, okay, so about $300,000 then left. And perhaps some of that can go towards these higher priority improvements. So that's good news. Thank you.
This is a personal observation, but I think that the person that kind of got us all going on this was the chair of the park board, Joseph Hulbert. Are you still the chair? Yeah. All right. And it was his observation, at least my recollection is it was his observations that got us thinking about this on a council-wide basis, and also the park board itself. So I think you've got a couple of questions. I thought I saw you indicate to me that you had a question or two, and go ahead.
Yeah, just I guess a question, observation kind of wrapped up here. I liked your report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I like that it makes it clear that some reinvestment in the course here would definitely help our bottom line. Do you really think that having a expanded Braemar Grill operation to serve non-golfers could increase rounds by 5% or more?
I do. I do believe that you improve the food and beverage. Food and beverage at a golf course has a couple of benefits to the facility. I mean, number one is the actual revenue it produces itself as its own business, but it also helps improve the rounds of golf. There are people who may not otherwise come to the facility because the food and beverage operation is not good, or may choose to play somewhere else because of the food and beverage operation. It's certainly a large component to the overall golf experience. And when you consider the amount of time that it takes to play golf, and it's a challenge for our industry, there's no question about it, but if you have commute time to and from, if you get there a little bit early and you play 4.5 hours of golf, you know, you're looking at a 5.5 maybe hour day. You're likely to cross paths with one meal in terms of your daily activities. And the fact that the quality of the food and beverage operation being improved, I think, would definitely improve the golf operation as well.
I'm not the golf historian. There's certainly people here that know a lot more about the history of local golf than I do, but you talk to people that have played Braemar for 30-plus years, and they'll tell you that it used to be like the destination course. You know, that and Bunker Hills or some other public courses were like the destination course. And a lot has changed where you've got local courses that have opened up, like Stone Ridge, Rush Creek, Chaskatown course. There's a lot of high-level courses that have opened up in the last 30 years. So it seems to me it would benefit us to try to make Braemar more of a destination again. So improving the clubhouse operations and the food service would certainly be one. And reinvesting money back into the course, I think, would be another, because this stuff takes time. Bunker Hills was in the news recently because they just opened up a brand new clubhouse. I think it's a $9 million facility. So if we want to keep our eye on somebody to see how their new clubhouse operates, that would be one to keep an eye on. Bunker Hills has rates that are very much in line or close to our rates. I think it's pretty close. But they host state opens. They host. They had the Burnett Senior Classic out there for a number of years. A local championship quality course. So I just would like to see, as a community, that we try to position Braemar back as an asset the same way it was maybe considered 30 years ago. And so some of the things like the range, I think you said it's well maintained. I was just there a week ago, and it's really not. And it has nothing to do with the staff. It's just a well-utilized range, and you hit balls on it enough time, you're just going to have dead grass. If we could get money to expand the range and do some of these things sooner rather than later and try to reposition this asset, I'd like to see that. And let's see. When you talk about clubhouse operations being 56% of the total clubhouse expenses or personnel costs, is that just the grill itself that you're saying, or is that the entire clubhouse operations?
I'd have to review again. I don't remember specifically what was in that expense line item. I'm not sure what other clubhouse expenses might be included in that. I'd have to take a look at that maybe together with you again to go over it in detail in terms of what exact line items were included in that.
Okay.
I don't recall offhand.
Thank you. Daniel?
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things that wasn't mentioned is the benefit of Braemar to a sense of building community. And the City Council and the ladies and gentlemen who've served in the past need to be thanked. It is nice to live in a city where you get to know people other than going to your block party once a summer. At the municipal liquor store, at the various hardware stores, the grocery stores, you see people you've met through Braemar Golf. And that builds a sense of, I think, looking after each other, which is a delightful part of a city. My question to you, Mr. Singer, no one in this room knows if golf is going to go the way of bowling and tennis, where less people play and bowling alleys disappear and tennis courts aren't used. We must be one of the rare municipalities that have 27 holes. And has anyone tried programming where a couple of nights a week from, say, 3 to 6, those couples who have obligations with kids and have very limited time, if there's what I would call, for lack of a better word, speed golf, where you have to be kind of a good golfer and you promise to get on and off in 2 hours and 15 minutes. We've got the benefit of having 9 holes available for something like that. Is anybody doing that around the country?
I've seen all sorts of things like that. There's a lot of innovative and creative things that you could try to do to stimulate activity. Absolutely. I would be all for it. What works in public golf is programming like that, is a reason to be there, I call it. Is rather than just show up to play golf, there's something going on at Braemar all the time, so that when you do show up there, you know it's going to be something. A social night, a ladies' night, a men's night, whatever it might be, afternoon, early day. We certainly have seen that in a lot of places, and you have to be creative with that. But yes, I think that would fall under that category, and certainly something that if you think that there's a demand for it and that the people would be interested in that, certainly give that a try. Absolutely.
Ellen.
Hi. I read that you are recommending a reserve fund, and I'm wondering what the rule of thumb would be for percent of budget that you'd consider as a reserve fund for capital improvement.
Yeah, you should try to save at least 2 or 3% of gross revenues if you can. The problem is a reserve fund is tough because when you have debt service and you're not earning a profit on your operations at present, it's difficult to try to save for it. But the flip side of it is, if you earn more than that and you have more than that left over, it should be retained within the reserve fund. I mean, that traditionally was the enterprise fund model and how it would work, that if the enterprise fund was profitable, those monies would be retained within that fund to save for reserve for replacement. But yes, definitely, there's certainly issues coming along, and I know you've talked a lot about facelift issues at this meeting tonight, and those are certainly very important, but you've also got aging infrastructure in your irrigation system and some other things that are, back of the house type of things that could affect you and would be much more problematic for you if they were to fail on you. So definitely try to save as you can.
And that reminds me, I'm looking at the proposal to change the executive course. Would that be the time, when we're talking about changing the range, would that be a time for us to perhaps begin putting in a new irrigation system in that section? Would you recommend that? Because those 9 would be down already.
Yeah, that's a good point. Not necessarily, though. I know that you do have, your current system is sectioned, and it's been put together in pieces because of the other renovations that have been done. I think it could be worth looking at to see if that's a particular area of concern for the facility. My general recollection of it is that it is not, but if that was a concern, I think it's something that you could consider. However, the other side to that, though, is that the renovation that we're recommending for this would not be overly disruptive to the entire Braemar Executive Course. To turn the Braemar Executive Course into a Par 3 course isn't going to really take that much because it already has 7 Par 3 holes and 2 Par 4s, so you really would just be changing 2 holes in order to bring it into what you need. And basically taking out 2 holes that lie at the north end of the range presently. I think they're number 2 or number 3, if I'm not mistaken, and then finding places somewhere else within the golf course to add another tee and another green to make 2 additional holes. So you may find that it's not that disruptive to put it together that it would need a full irrigation replacement. But I think your point is appropriate, that if you're going to do renovations like this, you should always look to what else could you do at the same time. If the golf course, for example, has to be closed for any period of time to do this, what else could we be doing that could improve it? But I don't think that that's an urgent issue based on what I've seen.
Sure. Can wrap up around 7 here. Bill, anything?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for this report. I'm not a golfer, and I'm not particularly familiar with golfing operations, but this report did bring it into a fair amount of clarity for me, so I appreciate that. Most of the questions that I would have asked have already been asked, but could you elaborate a little bit on your assessment of this market from the standpoint of whether or not any additional courses are planned or potentially could be planned to be brought on online in terms of operation? Are you aware of any that might be closing? Are there any sick men around the area? And how do you integrate that with your estimation, to build on a comment that was made earlier, with the golfing population either going up or going down over the next 5 years in the Twin Cities area, which would directly affect us?
Yeah, that's good. We tried to do the best we could with those observations. I can tell you that based on our research, and we are tracking this as part of an ongoing part of the National Golf Foundation's business, we did not have any new golf facilities within our tracking system for this area that are either presently in planning or under construction that would be opened. A lot of golf has been added over the years tied to residential development, as you're probably well aware. Perhaps maybe not as much in this market as some others. But golf was a very powerful amenity to sell real estate, and it was used in that fashion for a long time, and that certainly impacted the supply and demand balance for that. In terms of the number of golfers, I mean, we see golf as being somewhat flat over the last few years. It is not growing, but it's not shrinking either. But golf is interesting in that you have 2 measures we have to look at. One is the number of players, and 2 is the amount of golf that they play. And while the number of players certainly seems to be holding steady, the amount of golf that they play is definitely going down. So your golfer who used to play 10, 12, 14 times a year may only be playing 8, 10 times a year. And that is impacting in the number of rounds that are being demanded. So I think that that's certainly something to look at. But you know, golf is a lifestyle that people have worked very hard to afford in their lives, and there's really a core element to this industry of people that really are not going to give it up for anything. We've certainly seen that. They're hardcore, and they maintain a solid portion. What we've lost in golf is what I call the occasional player, somebody who may only play a couple of times a year, has either given it up or they'll only come out, as one council member had mentioned, for the tournament once a year and get lost driving around type of person. You know, those are the people we got to try to get out a couple of more times a year, and that would really have impact on the industry. Your other point about courses closing, I'm not aware of any, but that you know, these are private businesses, and when the banks foreclose or whatever, if they've taken out debt to build their big clubhouses or whatever, I mean, that could happen at any time. So it's certainly something that you could be aware of, to keep your eye on. But I think that golf as an industry is still relatively strong. It's not as strong as it once was, but it's not anywhere close to some of the others that were mentioned earlier in terms of declines. And it's particularly strong in Minnesota. That's the one thing that has definitely jumped out at me in doing this work, that your golf participation in this area is higher than anywhere else I've seen. And it's reflected in the activity that you have. It's a short season. I imagine there's some cabin fever element to that too. You get cooped up during the course of the winter and you want to come out and do something active outdoors, and you take advantage of that opportunity to do it. We may be spoiled in some other places in the Sun Belt where we can do that year round, but I think that I don't really see anything, in my opinion, in looking at this that would say that it's immediately threatened to fall off a cliff type of thing. But you certainly need to look at it, and the new reality we mentioned earlier, I think, is something you need to include in your planning.
We've got two other questions we want to posit here, I think. Susan, go ahead.
Okay.
And Kia.
Great. Thank you. Being a really horrible golfer and someone who probably only goes once a year, now that you've seen Braemar and the surrounding equivalent golf courses, with respect to a potential marketing plan going forward, is there something about Braemar that really does distinguish itself from other equivalent golf courses? And if so, what is that? Is it the locale, or is it a marketing program, or is it events, or the value, or the location? What is it that draws people to Braemar? Why?
Yeah, no, I think that you mentioned all of the above, which I would certainly agree with, and I would add one more element to it, and that's a something for everyone is definitely something that I would play up in the marketing of Edina Golf and Braemar in particular. Whether you're a beginner and you've never touched a golf club before, or whether you think you got a chance to be on the PGA Tour, there's something at Braemar for you. And that's really special and unique for you. I know that a couple of other facilities that I looked at also had the 9-hole pitch and putt, and a couple of Minneapolis facilities, I think, have that as well. But when you just look at the comprehensive review of the driving range facilities, the golf dome, the 2 executive courses, one of which could be adjusted to a pitch and putt, as well as the regulation 18 and the mix of 9s that you might get on the 27-hole course, I think there's definitely something for everyone there that would definitely be, that's what jumped out at me as front and center with this. It's something for everyone.
Good. Thanks. Kia?
It seems as though if we're going to go ahead with the Braemar Grill, we should, entice the community, and we have been successful in our other parks by holding free events such as movies in the park. And I know it's suggested that we hold sports game nights and stuff like that. Have you heard of other facilities doing that kind of community engagement activity? And then my second question is, if we do go that route, it seems like it would compete with the banquet market for marketing efforts and space. So what would be, how do you see the trade-off by doing these community events? Obviously, we're bringing in new people who maybe have not been to Braemar, and we can then market there for golf, get them there first, and then go from there. Whereas these banquets, people who may not be close to Braemar, we might not be establishing a relationship. Where would you put your effort between those two interests?
I would definitely both. I think that the staff and the management there certainly has to make sure that they balance it together so that they're not double booking events. But I'm a firm believer in programming and events. What I mentioned before about the golf, from this gentleman's question about some ideas, I firmly believe a reason to be there is certainly very important, and events that are going on. And direct answer to your question is yes, I have seen other communities do that type of thing. Trying to have social hours and wine tasting parties and wine and cheese parties and all sorts of different things like that, just to give people a reason to be there and promote it that way. I think that definitely is the way to go, to try to attract new people who are not familiar with it maybe and haven't seen it before, to show what you have and what you have to offer. Absolutely.
Good. We're going to close it up now. I was having a little sidebar here with Member Bennett, who's going to hold some questions and give those to staff. But we thank you very much for coming up, doing the work. This is going to be very helpful for us, and look forward to a time when we can have the Park Board make some recommendations to the council as to what we ought to tackle first, and we'll try to make this closer to a premier facility than a standard facility, which is kind of the Edina way. So
That's good, and I'm just hopeful that in the end your golf system ends up better than it was before you had engaged the NGF. That's ultimately our goal, and we'll certainly watch it very closely and see what happens as well.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Singer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to move on to another topic that involves land use and planning, and the Park Board may want to slip out here at this moment. What do we have here? Where's everybody going? Thank you. All right, the next matter we have to cover during our work session this evening is an update on the process for the Grandview Small Area Plan. We're going to preview the work plan and hear a little bit about the proposed consultant team. I see several members of the Planning Commission here, along with Commissioner Staunton, who has been leading this Grandview Small Area Plan study endeavor. And welcome, Commissioner Staunton. And Commissioner Fisher, welcome as well.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Wanted to come and kind of give a preview tonight at this work session of a presentation that we'll be making and some requests that we'll be making of you next week at your September 6th regular meeting of the City Council. One of the reasons I wanted to do this is that I will not be there on the 6th. I have a conflict that evening, but Mike Fisher will be able to present on our behalf, and so he is here with me as well this evening. Wanted to also point out that we have some other members of our steering committee here, Peyton Robb, who is a member of the steering committee and our executive committee, and I'll be explaining in a couple of minutes what exactly the two roles of those organizations are. And I did see Thomas Rauchley earlier, and I think he slipped out, but he's also on our steering committee. So just wanted to thank them for being here. And we've asked some of the members of the steering committee and executive committee to join you next Tuesday as well at your regular meeting. So with your indulgence, I just want to kind of go through a presentation that'll be a bit of a preview of what we'll do next week, get some feedback from you, and have a little bit of discussion about where we're at. And since we are in a work session, please feel free. I mean, I think this should be informal, and feel free to interrupt if you have questions. What I want to do is make sure that you're comfortable with the material that we'll be covering next week and give you a chance to ask some questions in a little more informal environment. So really what the overview is, really three parts: where we've been, what's next, and council action. And it's a little bit hard to see on the screen, this chart, but I put it on this initial slide. It is a part of the work plan that you had in your packet. We've got a draft work plan in your packet. There are some edits that we're still working out of that. We'll have a final version for you before your meeting next week. But what I thought the work, this timeline is very helpful for is it gives you kind of a full spectrum. So it goes all the way back to the second quarter of 2010, and then all the way forward through the first quarter of 2012. And you can see some of the items on there. On the far left is the initial small area plan guide process, and then on the far right is the kind of completion of the plan and adoption of a final plan. So this gives kind of some context to folks. We are working through a process that is pretty process intensive, and that's important to do, but at any one moment in time, sometimes you forget where you are on the timeline, and I think this is a really helpful way to say we're working toward a solution, and this is where we're at. So I'm just going to run through really these three items: where we've been, what's next, and what council action we're going to be asking for next week. As you recall, on the where we've been, you start back in December of 2009, so almost 2 years ago, when Mike Fisher and Michael Schroeder and I came to you to really recommend a process of moving forward with creating a vision and ultimately creating a small area plan for the Grandview District. That was kicked off in April of 2010 with what we now in shorthand are referring to as the 10 meetings in 20 days. Which was our initial visioning process, and Councilmember Sprague actually was a member of the community advisory team at that time, and it was when we really worked hard as a group, a very community-led group, to fashion a vision for the future of this process. I was talking with Mike earlier today, and one of the things we're trying to caution ourselves against doing is we now refer to it as the 10 meetings in 20 days. And for those folks who are around it, instantly they nod their heads and understand what it is. But I think it's important for us to kind of continue to remind folks who maybe aren't familiar with it what a community-led process that was and how grassroots and organic it was. That half of this 18-member community advisory team was selected on the night of the first meeting by themselves, not by the city council, not by board and commission members, not by anyone except the residents and neighbors who showed up at that meeting. And so it was really a grassroots kind of organization that put together these recommendations and this vision. December of 2010 is when we brought the final plan from that guide process forward to the council, and the council adopted the guiding principles that we had created. We created 7 guiding principles that really made up the vision for the future of the Grandview District. And I quote from the report that was approved by the council, that the council adopted the guiding principles as, quote, the foundation for development of a small area plan for the Grandview District. That same month, we got word from the Metropolitan Council that we had been awarded a Livable Communities grant to support and fund the actual small area planning process. Our guide plan process was a terrific process and one that lots of folks gave generously of their time and their expertise, but it was really an all-volunteer effort, and this permitted us to have a small area planning process that would be more than all volunteer, that could engage some experts with some experience in different communities and different settings. And so in March of 2011 was the last time that we were before you, and it was to ask for your authorization to move forward with this small area planning process. And since we've had 4 or 5 months since then, we thought it was appropriate to come back and kind of give you the update on what we've been up to. You may recall that when we presented to you in March of this year, we outlined 4 stages to this next process. It was going to be an approximately 1-year process beginning in April and ending at the end of the first quarter of 2012. And the 4 parts were first to have an organization of the community leadership, really in much the same way that we had done it in the CAP process. That was one of the things that the report recommended and that the council approved, was that we move forward with a process that it was community-led like that first phase and included selection in much the same way. Second was to select a consulting team, a team of experts to help us as we move forward. Third was the creation of a draft development framework that would really be the details of what's the plan for the future of the area. And then the final stage would be a report. So here's what we've been up to since March 1st. It's kind of a quick overview of the items that we've been engaged in. We did kick the second phase off on April 14th with a kickoff meeting. In that first couple of meetings, we selected a steering committee. We have also appointed an executive committee. We have created some work groups and selected now a consulting team, and we have created a draft of a work plan for your review. So first, the steering committee. We have a 52-member steering committee. This was composed actually in much the same way as our community advisory team was in the first phase. We held a kickoff meeting, we extensively advertised it, we reached out to the community and asked people to come and join us as we started this second phase. And these are the folks who came out to help us. They are residents of the community, they are business and property owners, they are folks who are interested in the process and interested in helping plan the future of the Grandview District. In our initial meeting, we divided into, we chose several work groups as possible work groups, areas like land use, community needs and public realm, transportation, finance and market analysis. And I'll tell you, we had a couple of others, and what we did at that initial meeting is we asked people to kind of divide into areas that they might be interested in. And much like we did at the kickoff to the phase one, we just asked people to self-select. What's a subject matter you're interested in? What's something that maybe your skills in your professional life might be helpful for? And some of those didn't get much interest. And so at the end of that process, we really had these 4 areas as things that people were interested in, and we created groups that are now studying each of these. Then an interesting thing happened. We had originally planned that we might do, that the steering committee would be made up just of representatives from that group. But instead, we decided to proceed with the steering committee, and then at one of the meetings that we had, the steering committee members actually suggested that what we ought to do is have a smaller executive committee to help do the kind of day-to-day work in between meetings. And so Mike Fisher and Michael Schroeder and I were named to the executive committee, and then we took representatives from each of these 4 work groups. So the person leading the land use group, the person leading the community needs and public realm group, and the same for transportation as well as for finance and market analysis. And then the 8th member that we thought was important to have on the executive committee was a representative of the business and property owner community in the area. And so those 8 folks plus Carrie Teague, the city planner, have made up the executive committee. And we've been meeting twice a month on Wednesday mornings to really prepare in between steering committee meetings. Yeah, Councilmember Sprague.
So the 3 of you were the original 3 members, then the 4 chairs from the working groups, and then who selected the 8th member?
Then the 8th member was a member of, what we decided at the initial meeting was that we needed somebody from the business and property owner group. We didn't know who that would be at that exact meeting. Later we had Colin Bredesen, who is with the Patisserie Margot business up in the Grandview District, volunteered. And at a subsequent steering committee meeting, we came back and proposed him as the 8th member of the group, and that was approved by the steering committee. And that's been, that's a good example. I'm glad you asked that question. It's a good example of how we've kind of operated, that the executive committee has done this in-between work, meeting a couple of times before or between each steering committee meeting. But any decisions are all made by the steering committee. So we might bring suggestions back, we might tee up ideas, but we bring them back to the steering committee for their approval. And so since March, or since we started in April, we have had a regular steering committee meeting on the 3rd Thursday of each month. And then our executive committee meetings have been on the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays of each month. So it's given us a nice opportunity to kind of have some continuity. So in June, we started to tackle the notion of engaging a consulting team, a team of consulting experts. And one of the things we've tried to do throughout this process is really just think fresh about everything that we do. And in the past, what would happen is when you're going to engage consultants, generally staff would engage the consultants and bring forward somebody that you would then work with as a community team. And we decided we wanted to have more of our steering committee and executive committee input into that whole process. And we also decided we wanted to think a little differently about how to attract experts from the consulting community. So instead of putting out your traditional RFP, which is a request for proposals, we decided instead to put out a request for interest. And what we asked consultants to do was, instead of giving us the big marketing binder that they spend hours and hours and thousands of dollars putting together in the hopes that they'll be selected for the project, we said, give us about a 6-page letter. And in that letter, tell us a little bit about yourselves and tell us about what you think about our process and how you might be able to help. And in that letter, we also indicated that we're looking for help on these areas of transportation, land use, and community needs, as well as finance and market analysis. But we're going to put our own team together, and it's not necessarily going to be the team you might assemble as part of your letter of interest. We might pick some from here and some from here, and we're going to stitch our own team together. And ultimately, when we went through this process, we found a talented team we're very excited about, and I want to talk about them in a minute. But I think that what is in common among those groups, and in fact we did pick people from different groups, is that they understand that we need their help, but it's for achieving our vision. And that's the really important part, is that this is a community-led process that is our vision that's being enacted, and what we need is some expert help to get there. So the team is made up of really 5 components. There are team leaders. There's 2 firms, the Cunningham Group and the Close Landscape Architecture Group, who we were very impressed with, and we thought that they had very complementary skills. And so we took the unusual step of asking them to co-lead this process. Both Mike Lamb and Andrew Dresner, as well as Bruce Jacobson and Bob Close, work really in the kind of land use community design area, and all of them had terrific skills in kind of translating a vision into a design for an area and urban design, and so we were very impressed with them, and we thought that it was appropriate for them to lead this group. In addition, we asked Jack Brose from the H.R. Green firm to join us. Jack is the one outside consultant that actually gave us some assistance during the first phase of this project, and we were again impressed with his creativity and his recognition that transportation is multimodal, that it's about connectivity, it's about movement, not necessarily speed, and is a creative thinker who actually is on the cutting edge of what's going on in transportation design in our state. He actually does some of the training at the Minnesota Department of Transportation, and so I think he's going to be an excellent addition to the team. Antonio Rosell from the Community Design Group is also going to help us. You may remember Antonio. He and his firm worked on the bike plan that was part of the comprehensive plan, and did a terrific job on that. When we were absolutely kind of overwhelmed by his enthusiasm. That was quite infectious during the interview process, and so we're pleased to have him as part of the team. And then finally, a fellow named Tony Schertler, who is with the Springstead firm, and Tony is going to help us with finance issues. Tony is a lawyer by training. Don't hold that against him. But he is also, what we were really impressed with in the interviews is that he is positioned similar to many of us on the executive committee and the steering committee, in that he does this advice professionally, but he also sits on the St. Paul Planning Commission, and he has been co-chairing the Ford plant reuse effort. And we thought that was a very similar kind of project, albeit on a grander scale, of a place that people know is going to be abandoned, and they're trying to figure out how to plan the future for it. So we thought he would be a really helpful piece to the puzzle. So then we set about the business of creating a work plan. And again, we did this in a little bit different way than normally is done. We asked for people to express letters of interest, and instead of giving us the big work plan ahead of time and getting 15 different work plans, we said, let's select a group and then we'll do a work plan. And so we had a scoping session on August 3rd with the executive committee and some members of the steering committee. just trying to kind of download what we had learned over the last 15 months and get them up to speed on where we were. And then we worked over the next 10 days or so to create the draft work plan that was in your packets for this evening. We completed that about the 12th, and then on August 18th, we had our latest meeting of the steering committee, and the steering committee approved the selection of the team as well as the work plan. We did have some discussions at that meeting about some minor modifications to the draft work plan. Those are not in the version that you have now, but they will be in the version that gets to you by your packets for next Tuesday. They're really pretty minor modifications, but important ones to get in there. So again, you know, we continue this process of the executive committee kind of trying to work the details, but the steering committee being the group that has the responsibility for approving the process as it moves forward. And so it's their recommendation that's in front of you tonight for the team and the work plan. This is a quote. It's not attributed to anybody because I kind of made it up, but it's what I think is a representative sample of the conversation that we've been having at the steering committee and the executive committee about what we're really after. And let me just read it for you. Right now, the Grandview District is more a collection of buildings and parking lots than a place. People tell us it's an area they go to almost every day. We want to create a place that they'll continue to go to, but also want to stay at. And I think that kind of captures, it captures a whole variety of comments that have been either snippets of that or in the spirit of that. And that is kind of what we're trying to accomplish here. So, segueing to what's next, the work plan outlines the process for the fall. And the process for the fall is really to engage community stakeholders to convert these guiding principles that we developed last year and that the council adopted in December into a small area plan. We're going to do that. The major feature of our process is to have 3 community workshops. And you'll see the dates there, September 21st, October 25th through the 27th, and then November 15th through the 16th. The labels tell you a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish there. Discussion and discovery is really an opportunity for the team to get the complete download, if you will, from work groups, from business and community, or business and property owners in the area, from city staff, because there's a lot of important infrastructure and other issues that city staff needs to weigh in on. And to then kind of try to digest that and reflect that back a little bit for the steering committee as well as other members of the public. The second workshop is a 3-day workshop, and it's captioned Ideas and Options. And that's really the place where we start to spin out what are some possibilities, what are the things that we might be able to try, and to do some focus groups. They, again, would be with some of those same groups, but even broader than that, trying to make sure we're getting to maybe folks who've developed in other parts of the Twin Cities area, maybe all kinds of other folks. It could be kids at schools. It could be neighbors in the Grandview Square area. It could be neighbors who live nearby. So the idea is to get as much input and to try and float some ideas and see what the possibilities are. And then in the third workshop is entitled Decide and Deliver. It's really to narrow those options and try to come up with a proposed plan that is both innovative but also realistic and feasible and doable. And we recognize that there's lots of pieces to that, and it's important that it be something special, but it also be something that's doable. And then I want to mention also that there'll be a check-in with the council. I think we're not sure whether that's going to happen between the first and second meetings or the second and third meetings, but I suspect that we'll be coming back to you, as we said we would in the March meeting, to kind of get periodic check-ins, to fine-tune, to get some refinements, to get your feedback. I want to talk just a little bit, I've got maybe 2 slides left here. I want to talk about the product at the end of this process. We have done a lot of wrestling with the product, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know that we have settled exactly on what the product is going to look like. What we understand we need is something that is accessible, enforceable, and inspiring. When I say accessible, I mean we are going to try our hardest to get as many people as we can in our community engaged in this process. Having said that, we recognize that we will never get everyone. We will never get every single person in this community engaged in this process for all kinds of good reasons. And we need a product at the end that someone who hasn't been engaged in the process can quickly get a grasp on what we're trying to accomplish. And so when I say accessible, I mean it has to be something that in a finite amount of time they can really understand what we're trying to accomplish. By enforceable, I mean we need to have something that can actually be a part of the comprehensive plan and will impose requirements that future developers, future city officials will all have to meet. And when I say inspiring, I mean, you know, if we're going to make big change, we have to make it exciting. We have to lead people to that. We have to make them understand why it's going to be important. So whatever it is we're coming up with, and I think it's going to be, as I mentioned down at the bottom, a multimedia format. We're going to have a lot of different pieces to it. But it's going to have to describe why planning is necessary. I gave a presentation, I think the mayor was at it recently at a local Rotary Club, and one of the questions was, why don't you just sell the property and stop with all this nonsense? And I think that's while I disagree with that as an approach, I think that's an understandable question, and I think we need to explain to people why, you know, it's important if we want to get something that we can be proud of, that we plan it, and that we don't just trust that it'll happen by letting things go. Second, it's going to have a summary of, you know, how are the stakeholders viewing this? How are property and business owners, how are community residents, how are other folks who use the area viewing this? Third, and very importantly, it's going to have a direction for the future development. It's going to have a framework. And then finally, and I think this is really important, a plan for implementation, so that when we end this phase, we know where we need to go from here in order to make things actually happen. So there's really two things we'll be asking for you next week. One will be approval of engagement of the consulting team. There is a budget that is in the draft work plan. It is within the budget that is covered by the Metropolitan Council Livable Communities Grant. And Carrie Teague will be working with the consulting team to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the grant and the requirements of the grant, so that funding is able to be used for that. And then also to get your feedback and approval on the work plan. So with that, that kind of gives you an overview. There were, I know, a couple of little notes that I wrote myself after I did this. I wanted to make sure and get some sense from you about. I'm happy to answer any questions that Mike is as well. You know, one of the things we wanted to think about is whether you'd like the consulting team to be here next week at the meeting on the 6th. They certainly could be, but that's kind of up to you. And then secondly, I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about, you know, a reminder about communications. We are working very hard on trying to reach out to folks. Chris Rothfadal, who was a member of the community advisory team, and is on our executive committee, has been doing great work trying to marshal resources and working with Jennifer Benarat at the city on all kinds of communication avenues. But we'd appreciate any efforts that council members can make, and others who may be watching this or may watch next week, to encourage folks to come out and engage in this process. So, with that, if you have any questions.
Let me ask Member Sprague, if you have any questions, or would you comment on the consulting team? What are your thoughts on the consulting team being here next week for a meeting?
On that particular issue, I was just thinking that I like that the process has run autonomously, and I prefer more of a hands-off approach. I like that you're coming here and updating us, and we're making these decisions, but I think the community is driving the process, and I'm comfortable with what I see here. I don't see a need for that myself. But I had another question. But
sure, you go ahead.
Okay, all right. My question is, first to take a step back, the working groups formed early, has there been any work product coming out of those pre-consultant that we should know about?
The answer is that those work groups have been meeting and have been generating product. We actually have posted much of that on the website, cityofedina.com/Grandview. We said that in unison like a dozen times at one meeting when we talked about this, so I can remember it. It is what we would kind of refer to as work in progress. So, for instance, Community Needs Group, Kim Montgomery is leading that group, and she pulled a group of people together and had what she referred to as a community conversation, trying to get input from folks about what do they think we need in this area. Larry Chesler, who's leading the transportation group, has worked with his group to come up with kind of a matrix of 7 or 8 concepts that they think they really need to be working on and information that's relevant to those. They haven't been adopted, so to speak, by the steering committee, but those groups have continued to work, and I think part of what we hope to do in the September 21 meeting, the very first community workshop, is to download that information from those work groups so that the consulting team is familiar with that and up to speed on it.
And on your slide, when you're talking about the consultants, I didn't see anyone mentioned for Community Needs Public Realm. Isn't that what Cunningham is doing in addition to? Okay.
Yeah.
I just didn't see it on the slide, so I want to make sure.
And it's a fair question. It was a category that we asked for, and in fact, Cunningham and Close both responded on both the land use as well as the community needs in public realm, and we're really envisioning them covering that, along with, I'd say, Antonio Rosell a little bit as well.
And are they aware of the work product that has already been advanced by the Community Needs Public Realm group? Have they been able to download that information in preparing for this?
We're in the process of doing that now.
Okay.
And I would say that they have, through the work group leaders, because the scoping session was conducted with the work group leaders who are members of the executive committee. So one of the reasons we did it that way is we wanted to make sure that the consulting team members had a chance to hear from, kind of conduits from those work groups as to the activities they had been undergoing and what's important to them.
And then in terms of what's available for them to look at, do you have the 1999 Quality of Life Survey available? Have you seen that? I know Member Bennett had a personal copy, and we've been hard-pressed to find one at City Hall, but we can get that to the team. I think that's valuable information. And there's also, the new survey, the 2006 Park Board survey, the work product from the Community Needs Group that's already met, and then also from our original the guide process. Remember the first meeting, and we had some ideas on the wall. I mean, those are the kinds of things I think should be available.
So the short answer is we want to make sure to gather all of those things, and one of the things in particular that this reminds me about is the whole kind of community needs inventory, or the facilities inventory.
Yep.
Is something that we're very interested in. We recognize there's a little bit of chicken and egg issue because we're not quite sure when it's going to be finished, but obviously thinking about what we need in this area, it's important to take that kind of context into consideration as we do that. So we have been trying to gather all of the materials that you've mentioned, and we either have them all or we're on the trail of finding them.
Thank you.
Anyway, if you want to jump in, Mike.
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question, because I do think we should this is a good time to talk about this tonight, the whole public realm. Now, from an urban design perspective, when you think of public realm, and we've had interesting discussions in our executive committee, because I think of it as a number of things. It's all of the outdoor space, but it can also be actual facilities, actual buildings. And Kim, who's on the executive committee, and several of us have had many conversations about this, because I think she would really like to see, or wanted to see, the consultant team help us go out and conduct surveys and really figure out what the programmatic answers might be for public uses. And I think it's really important as a community that we do that. And I think a lot of people are very much in favor of public uses here. But one of the discussions we had is this consulting team, while they are dealing with public realm, we're not, to the extent that I understand, Kevin, you can correct me, we're not asking them to go out and find the definitive answer of programmatically what should be here. And if you want us to, as part of this process, we should talk about that tonight. And the way I'm sort of looking at it, and as we've talked about it, is that we need to absolutely plan this area for public uses, whether it's a building or not a building or multiple buildings. And the planning process should show us where that is best to happen in this area. But if I don't believe in this process that we're conducting, we're going to have a definitive answer about what the program elements would be in that kind of a facility. And what I wanted to make sure we talk about is, as a council, we don't want to get in a situation where all of a sudden there's a surprise and you're sort of backed into a corner and have to make a decision, are we doing this use here right now? I think the process would be best served if, and also because these other things are out there still, the surveys, the study of existing facilities, all of these are really important components so we can make better decisions in the planning aspect. But again, stop me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we're going to have in this process be able to tell you that, this is exactly what the community wants. Do you disagree? In terms of programmatic uses, I think we will know.
Right, but you'll have some alternatives, and I think, having followed this process from the beginning, I don't think we've come this far just to abandon the last major public parcel to private development. I think we need to look at possible public realm, something significant. I look at Grandview 1 on the other side, let's just say, called Grandview 1, and to me the public element is more of an afterthought, and maybe we lost an opportunity. I don't want to lose that same opportunity on this side of the street. So as long as it's being discussed, then I think it can take care of itself organically, but there needs to be, I feel there needs to be some direction there.
Well, and I would say, not that I can speak for all 52 people that have been involved in the steering committee, but there's been a very, I think, overwhelming amount of people that agree. And any, planning principle would say, if you can design your public realm, then the private will come in. That's what's going to make it successful. So I think there's a very strong focus on public realm, whether it's a building, not building, we'll figure that out. But I just want to make sure that we're not setting expectations here or with anybody that we're going to be able to tell you what that program looks like for any kind of facility. Which is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I think we can deal with it in terms of allocating enough space in the right place in this area if that kind of facility is going to happen.
But too, if you look at the community needs, some of the responses already, there are themes that have emerged from the literature. So, that's why you may not determine the exact program element, but you already have some themes in the data that's out there that you could use. From the beginning of our process, which mirrored a lot of the park needs survey and so on. So I think the writing's there on the wall. You can just leverage that.
Well, and as this information comes in, I think it will I'm guessing it will become much more clear. And then it's really going to and that's part of us kind of keeping you up to speed as this is happening, so you can direct or redirect us as we're going along in terms of how we deal with that component. How definitive do you want us to be? Again, we're trying to pull this whole community together on this, but it seems like there's a lot of questions out there right now in the community about these type of public facilities, so we just have to kind of keep that all going in concert.
And I think it'll be a little bit of a question of how specific are we going to be. Obviously, we're going to be more specific than we were with the 7 guiding principles. So we'll have some debates, I suspect, within the group about how close it's going to be to a blueprint, if you will.
I think I'm looking for, one, I don't need the heads of your groups here for the next meeting. I am with Member Sprague on that. I'm looking for you to tell me more, looking at the public spaces that we have in the bus garage that I view also as a public space. Do we have spaces that are good uses for some of the things that our community is looking for here? Or is this not the area we would put them? Is there some other area we would put them and we would use these for a different public need? you know, whether, I don't know, whether it be park and ride or whatever the other public need might be. I think that's what I'm looking for, so that I get direction as to the public property, and what it should be used for, or what it should be traded for, or whatever it is that we're going to do with it. You know, what is this area, what will it be good for? Does it have will it have a number of residents living in it that can use this kind of facility, or these kinds of, what will their needs be? Because I remember when we did do Grandview 1, as you call it, actually, it started with the library and the senior center, and everything else was designed around it. Where it doesn't look like that to you, that's originally how it started. That was what was going to go there. And so maybe the design doesn't look like those were the two driving forces, but they were.
Because of the proportions.
Yeah, right. So I'm looking for you to help us as a group, or whoever comes after us, how we should move ahead with the decision on public property as part of your end result.
Okay.
And and the theme within it, but I don't need you to tell me it needs 14 swimming pools with 8 lanes each and a diving well. Okay?
Thank you.
Member Bennett.
As is so often my want, I'm going to take a contrary position, and that is that having heard these consultants speak at the last steering committee meeting and knowing the importance of marketing and wanting people to come out for this process, I think it would be really helpful for the public to meet, as it were, the consultants, see their faces, hear their thoughts. I found it really inspiring. I've had some correspondence, some telephone calls, and attending just the last 2 steering committee meetings, sitting at the back, trying to be very quiet, has really helped me understand what this phase 2 is about, how the roles that different people are playing, the thoughts that are being expressed, and I am very impressed with the talent on the consulting team that's brought together for this, and seeing them in person and hearing them speak is part of how I became so impressed. So I would strongly advocate for them being present, if we can do it in such a way that we're not taking up their entire evening. I understand that we'd want to pinpoint the time for them to be here. And I second Councilmember Swenson's sense, as well as the concerns expressed by Councilmember Sprague. I think there have been some lost opportunities in the past, and what I'm looking for is an identification of what potential opportunities are and how we as a community can make them happen. Hearing Mr. Tony Schertler speak with Springstead, and I see the piece for his information in this. What's our vision, and how can we make that vision happen? And that vision may well include some public buildings or spaces that the community has previously identified as a need. And we're looking to this process to tell us whether or not it can happen, how it can happen.
Mary.
Thank you, Kevin and Michael. As far as whether they should attend the council meeting, I think we're going to maximize every minute they've got to give us in the work, in the steering committee and the process that you have laid out for them. While I think there's value in having them come, I think that it's really our job to say, hey, community, we need you on this. And in respect for their time, I feel like I don't need to see them at a council meeting. I'm overexcited about this process. I think that one of the mysteries, and you alluded to it in one of the questions from the Rotary meeting, why don't you just sell the building? And I think there's a lot of, okay, so we've put in 2 years on this, and we're now going to enter this phase where we've gotten this grant to have people come and help us come up with now a more tangible plan. Then what? So what I would say is, if you haven't, take a trip out to Maple Grove and go to the Town Green It's on Main Street in Maple Grove. If they didn't use this process to create that area, I don't know what they did. But this is, it is exactly this. And it is in the sand pits area of Maple Grove, and they're drawing their community that direction. And it is absolutely beautiful, from a structural standpoint to a landscaping standpoint to a variety of different architecture, different businesses, downtown City Hall, huge public space, at least a mile walking around a couple of pond areas. It is stunningly beautiful. So if people want an illustration of where this could go and what somebody else has done with a vision like this and really taken it to be something, that's a place without going too far they could go. But I think that's probably the biggest question that I see in the public's mind is, okay, I mean, I'm really excited about this, and we've always got that nucleus of people who really want to get in and be part of the process. And then there's the enormous silent majority looking at it going, I don't know what they're doing. Now, the dreams and what this could become, and your description of this as places and parking spaces. Because when I do go there, I go in and I go out. I don't stay there. There's nothing to stay at, really. There's really nothing to draw me there. So as I was reading this information here, I was just at a performance at Town Green a week and a half ago because they have an amphitheater there, which drew me there, and I walked the whole place while the performance was going on. And I thought that's really what people need to see if they're wondering what we're doing here. So I applaud your efforts. I mean, you're moving a ship in a direction that we're letting you steer, and it's just, it's very, very exciting. I've been trying unsuccessfully so far, but we might get it, to connect you with a gentleman who developed Grandview as it is today, because he can tell you what it was before, what he did, the uphill battle. He has had a variety of medical things. So hopefully we can get you connected with him. And because he brings to this process his challenges and his dreams and how he did it. And I think that's valuable because that can really validate for people who are looking at it, doubting it, and it can validate for the people who have put so much work into it, what you're doing. So thank you.
I would just add a comment, when you were talking about, well, we all talk about and think about this area as, you come here to do things, but you don't stay. And that's really the difference between public property, which we have a lot of there today, and public realm, which we were just talking about. Mm-hmm. It's creating the public realm that becomes the glue that all of the private development will stick to. And really, when we come out of this process, I think you're going to hear an awful lot of discussion about that public realm, and I think that's what we're all trying to figure out, what is that, because there are a lot of components to it, and I think that's where a lot of the discussion is going to happen.
Nothing gets me, I think, more revved up and excited than land use and the things that can happen with pieces of property. And you just mentioned the setting of the public realm to spawn private development around it, and I think of the promenade as the most recent example of what we've done in our community to try to set the stage for private development, and I think it'll happen. It doesn't always happen overnight, but it's a strategy that's used very successfully around the country. I think of Charleston, South Carolina, a longtime mayor down there, Joe Riley, that's always had that notion in mind, that you set the public realm space and the private development occurs around it, and it's created a magnificent city down there. So we'll see that happen here. I don't have any preconceived notion. I never did about whether it should be all public, all private, mix of uses. You will work through all of that. I thought the first go-around you all did tremendous work. Knowing that there's 52 people now involved in the steering committee is just fantastic. You look at that list and you think, wow, how fortunate we are that so many people in our town want to be involved in this process and are energized by it, and it will have their mark on it when it's all done. This collective community mark, saying this is a wonderful space for Edina. So you guys are doing great work. You always have. You always will. We are extraordinarily trusting of your guiding hand on all of these things, and we thank you, as Member Brindle said, for all the work that you've done. And we look forward to the next phase. I personally don't need the consultants here. I know that they all do great work. And at some point in time, we'll see some examples of some of the things that they've done other places, I'm sure. But it doesn't have to be next week. So,
you know, thank you all for the feedback and the kind words as well. Let me also add, just from a communications perspective, this is kind of new territory for me, so I thought I'd share it with you. I've actually written my first blog, and it's on edinacitizenengagement.org. I am pleased to say that there's been 2 actual comments on it, but they've both been from the city manager.
The 2 bloggers.
He's trying to prime the pump, but we're hoping that this is yet another way we can kind of get people to engage and talk about this, and maybe if they stumble across it when they're surfing the web, they might come out to a meeting and join us. So.
Well, there's some great content on that website. I'm very impressed with it.
Yeah, it's really...
Mr. City Manager, very impressed.
If I could just make one last comment, and Kevin really made me think of it. As I was sitting over there, really serving no purpose whatsoever, I had to think of a reason to come up and talk tonight because, you know, when we first started this process, it was the 3 of us really trying to figure out what the process might look like at the very beginning. And Kevin would use the term all the time, you know, I'm a canary in the coal mine. I don't know. I'm trying to understand what this all means. And I'm watching him tonight, and he's taken off, and he's really leading this and doing a fantastic job. I can't say enough about the leadership he's exerting. It's making Michael and, you know, we're just sort of irrelevant in this right now. So it's really fun to see. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Well, yeah, we're getting good comments about all of you from the citizenry that's either participating or has been over there to watch.
Well,
myself included. So, thank you.
Thanks for your support, and it really, I mean, we cannot do this without your support, so we really appreciate the fact that you've been so supportive.
Thank you very much. Anything else? All right. We stand adjourned. I thought you were going to slide out.